What I want to share with you is a bit of my own career story and how kind of midway into my career I discovered a pot of gold that I never knew existed, and it's actually that led me on to create We Are The City. So I'll give you a little bit of history. I left school at 15. I didn't leave with a bucket full of exams, but what I did leave with was passion and drive and commitment. Where I grew up was quite a socially and economically challenged area, and there was a kind of preconception of what you'd achieve and what you would become. I've never really been one to follow crowds, so I certainly set my eyes on different things. For the first 3 weeks of leaving school, I walked up and down Liverpool Street till someone eventually gave me a job. It doesn't go upwards from there because I lost that job about 5 months afterwards due to the fact that I've always struggled with perhaps not voicing my opinion. And back in those days, people were a lot more vocal about their prejudices and their biases. And growing up in such a multicultural area that I did, I found that very difficult to deal with. So I worked my way up in my career, often punching above my weight, going for jobs that really I knew I wasn't qualified for. Sometimes I got them off the back of my chipper Cockney personality. And some of the time, I had to study overnight, or I'd run around and try and kind of gather things up that would help me. But even then, when I look back, there was something that was fundamentally missing that could help me. So I worked my way up. I got to kind of a mid-management position and met my husband. He was a computer engineer and I was a computer trainer. And I used to unplug the leads in the back of my PC and log a help desk call. One way to bag your man. After about 3 visits, he kind of said, "Is there something you want to say?" And I was like, "Well, is there something you want to say to me?" And the rest was history. However, being in IT, I felt this immense pressure that I couldn't take a lot of maternity leave off because kind of technology was going to move on. And bear in mind, this was coming up year 2000. And, there was lots of money to be made in overtime because everyone was panicking the world was going to end from an IT perspective. So I only took 3 months off. Well, actually, one of my biggest regrets, only spending 3 months off with my first daughter. And I rushed back into my job only to find the position they'd given me was actually 2 rungs down the ladder from where I'd left. So the team that I was, and they could do that in those days because there weren't laws or things like that. In fact, they went as far as to put me in a basement. Shuffling papers, setting up user accounts when I'd used to been out there dealing with MDs and directors and kind of fixing their PCs because they're the ones that, don't know how to turn it on. So it's kind of my job every morning. And I thought, well, this isn't right. But then to the same point, I wanted to kind of spend time with the kids. I thought, right, okay, I'll swallow this for about a year and then I'm going to come back fighting. And a year later, I discovered I was pregnant with my second child. So I went off and I had 4 months off. Wow, a whole 4 months. And again, I get this immense pressure that I need to get back and I need to get back in the swing of things. And I returned back, and this time I'd kind of learnt a little bit to negotiate my way, and I was like, I'm coming back. I'm not going to any basement, right? I come back at an equal job. And by this time, our IT department had been outsourced to another company who had many more accounts, different jobs, and I thought, this is a great opportunity. And they'd won their first banking contract. So I went back onto their banking contract, and the account was in a mess and our job was to turn it around, and they'd flown in this great guy, a staple throwing exec actually. When he used to get annoyed, he used to throw things across the room, but it was passion, it wasn't aggression. But we worked and we managed to turn the account around. And while working for the IT company at the bank, I thought, you know what, I want to be a real boy. I want to work for the bank. Why am I getting paid half the money to kind of work for a third party? And a job come up at one of the US investment banks. And I remember one of the guys that I worked for, the original guy had moved back to the States, and he said to me, Vanessa, stay here, do what you do. You'll never cut it in investment bank. It's for blokes. And I was like, oh, okay, interesting. I'll be off then. And off I went. And I've never forgot him, actually. So off I went to join this US investment bank. And while I was there, another US investment bank came to buy our part of the bank. Again, great opportunity. I've always kind of been one of those individuals. I never get out the sandwich board, the end of the world is nigh. I'm like, right, this is change, it's happening. We kind of have to embrace it in the best way we can. However, the way that I embraced it was by becoming very focused on the fact this is my big career opportunity. And if anything, and I tell you now with complete honesty and transparency, I lost my way a little bit because I become very focused on my career. I never had any role models at the time. I never would dream of going to a women's network. I'd be like, oh, burn effigies of men, It's like, Where's that going to benefit me in any way? Because it was about my career. It was about presenteeism. And kind of going on this journey, I lost the very person that kind of got me there and where I'd become, like, and where I'd come from. And so I got to a point where I worked probably the best part of 45 days straight to merge these two banks together. I hadn't seen my kids, I hadn't seen my family, and I was working up this big thing was every night I'd go home to my husband, if I did go home, and I would say, I'm going to get my promotion at the end of this. You know, they're going to make me up to director. This is kind of where it's going. And at the end of that period, when everyone was kind of nursing their wounds, because we was all absolutely shattered, I got told, you know what, Vanessa, you've done a really good job, but it's not your turn this year. And I felt like someone had harpooned me. I was like, not my turn, I've given you my soul, my time, and everything. And I remember going home and saying to my husband, I'm sorry, how misguided kind of was I? I'd kind of given my everything. And then when I went back with a different approach. I went back after work, it was over the Christmas, and I thought presenteeism doesn't rule, but there must be a smarter way of kind of getting ahead. And I looked at myself, I mean, at that particular period, I looked like a man. You know, I wore a pinstripe suit. If Joan Collins could have borrowed me her shoulder pads, that's exactly what I would have had on, you know. And I thought, where's your femininity? Where's all the traits that you've got that you should be celebrating, you know, your attitude to risk, your emotional intelligence? Why are you hiding behind this fascia of someone that you're actually not? And I completely changed my tack. And it was at this particular moment that I went out and thought, where are all these people that could help me? I hadn't dreamed the fact that there was all these wonderful women's networks across London and wider, such as EPWN, such as Women in Banking and Finance, Womensphere, all of these things. And it's like, where have they been hiding, like, all my career? I also hadn't realised that there were these things called mentors, people that could have helped me, places I could have gone for advice. Because quite frankly, I'd lived in a bubble for the best part of 6 years with one goal, and that was kind of my career in this big job title. So in that frustration, I was moaning to my husband, and I said to him, why is there not one website for me, working woman, I spend 10 to 12 hours up here, that has all this stuff, that promotes these fantastic networks, that gives me women that I can look at and think, God, you know what, if they can do it, why can't I do it too? And he said to me, well, why don't we build it? You know, why don't you go on your journey of discovery and document it for other women? And as you go, why don't you capitalise on what these women that already know what you don't and bring them to this kind of website? Anyway, that was all over a bottle of wine. But in this, you know, it's going to change the world. And as sobriety dawned, you know, so did the responsibility of my 2 kids and everything else that I was doing. I never one to let anything go. My husband on the Monday sent me an email saying, I bought you a present. And being an IT boy, it wasn't, you know, flowers or chocolates. He bought me a website to name. Thanks, love. Which he consequently then built the first show of what was WeAreTheCity. And today, I mean, that website is, well, if we celebrate our 5 years, we promote 120 women's networks. There is an event on there that you can go to every evening. We promote 3WN and all these different networks. There's 700 women's networks in London alone. That's without the ones that are in your firm. There's a women in everything, trust me. I know because I've met them. But our job is, and as I've started to do that in my own career, I've moved away. I always had this dream of a chief title. And through my discovery of networking, mentors, giving back, learning to ask, you know, and using the collective to help me, not only did I achieve the Chief Operating Officer job title that I wanted, but I've built up this wonderful repository of information and help that I know helps other women. So I'm going to leave you, I mean, let's say today WeAreTheCity's 3.2 million hits a month. You know, we must be famous because we get spam attacks. I think that's the level of, we had one last night. And I was absolutely panicking that we were going to be down and, you know, today and people might be looking. But we've built up this wonderful website that gives you all of this information that profiles amazing women such as Sue and other people I think in the audience as well about, you know, their stories. And they're all different, you know, and they're not always success. Sometimes I think, as in the book, there's a lot to be learnt by things you didn't necessarily do right rather than the things that you did. So I'm going to leave you with a couple of things that I've learned in that past kind of 6 years, things that I wish that I did, you know, when I was perhaps younger on in my career. Because my career is now very much about helping you guys, to me, back to the pipeline. You're the legacy, you know, your sisters, daughters, sons, you know, are the future that we're going to leave behind. So it's my job, and women who go and come out and speak to you like this, you know, to kind of empower you to kind of help the next generation. So asking, let's talk about asking quickly. How many of you feel comfortable asking someone to help you? More than I thought. Okay. So in terms of something I know, so I speak to probably about 500 women, and that's probably the audience I've had with the most hands. So you've foxed me now. No, you haven't. The point of it is about asking. I think it goes two ways. So not just asking, but offering. And I believe I operate in a way that I offer up first before I ask. And for everything I ask for, I almost put a memory stone on the other side that I need to give something elsewhere to balance it out. So I think even from a networking perspective, I'll always open the conversation of what can I do to help you, who can I connect you with, kind of thing. I'm a true believer that these things will come back. You know, mentors, we speak about them, you hear it at every event, seek your mentors. I get asked, well, how? How do we find them? Well, you find them through your networking. You know, they could be sitting there underneath your nose, but it's pointless having one mentor because you'll end up being a clone of that individual. Multiple mentors, global mentors, people that make you look at life through different lenses. I mentor 15 individuals, and you know what? It's a two-way street. I learn as much from them as they learn from me. I have rules around mentoring, and I think, you know, my big ask is that all of you go out and think, who can I put my arms around? Who's that next generation? But here's my rules, and you may want to think about these. I won't mentor anyone who's not mentoring someone else. That's a fundamental rule, because otherwise, cascade stops with me. I also become their champion for life. So when that relationship, there needs to be a framework around mentoring. When that relationship's finished, my job is to find you your next mentor. I know enough about you now to know where your skills are and to be able to find you someone else. I'm lucky enough to have a big enough network to do that. But when you're no longer a mentee of mine, I become your champion. It's about what doors I open for you when you're not in the room are just important as the people that I connect you with. So think about those from a mentoring perspective. Again, where do you find them? It goes back to the networking thing. How do you get them? It goes back to the ask thing. So another fundamental thing, so we've said network, network, network. There's been a lot of stuff in the press recently, and I live by this, about giving back helps your career. You know, it not only helps your career, right, it makes you feel good about yourself, that you're kind of imparting your skills to someone else. Now, what could you do other than the mentoring? Well, I'll give you a prime example. Our schools are crying out for school governors. The skills that you guys have got that we just take for granted, could be governance, organisation, stuff like that. You'll go into one of these schools and you'll be like, oh, wow, you know, the stuff that you can do. And they're crying out for them every area. It doesn't matter your experience, your age. So you have to go through a series of checks. But there is a website, which I can provide all this to Annalisa, that shows you where all of those open positions are. Go back and really help the real pipeline, which is our kids. The other one is consider being a trustee on a charity. You know, if you do aspire to boards, and I'm with Sue, that not everybody does, and that's not the route to green, you know, go and be a trustee. I joined as a trustee on one of my boards. I've done a merger, I've done a complete rebrand. These are 1 in 20-year occurrences at corporates, but I've got experience by doing it. I'm also doing my bit for men. These are the Movember guys with the tash, you know, so I'm kind of doing my bit on both sides. But I've learnt so much as a consequence. And why did they want me? My business skills and my network. So it's a good place to kind of start. So school governor, you know, trustee of a charity. There's other things you can do. There's volunteering. Go back. How many of you have gone back to your old school and told your story? Anyone? A couple of you. There's an organisation called Forward First, or First Forward, I can give you the link, and they are looking for people all over to go back to their schools to inspire these kids. I would say if you think in terms of your career growth, 20% of your activities, if you can devote that to giving back, you'll be surprised where it takes you and the eyes that it opens for you and how much you can help others. So I've kind of covered off that, write and share your expertise. So for example, We Are the City. We're 4,000 articles deep in content. And most of it come from women like you. Write about your experiences. You can write for me. You can write for other websites. You know, give yourself a platform to tell your stories for other women to capitalise on. So I'll leave you there and we'll open up to the panel. However, the one thing that I would like you to think about is, you know, together we're truly stronger. You think of the expertise in this room and how we can help kind of future generations of talent. Thank you very much.